Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hi, everyone. This is Nahin with Seminary Co-op Bookstores in Chicago. I am so excited to be speaking today with Addie Citchens, the author of Dominion. A little bit about Addie. Addie E. Citchens was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and lives in New Orleans. A graduate of Jackson State University, she studied in the Florida State University Creative Writing Program and the Callaloo Creative Writing Workshop. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, The Oxford American's Best of the South, Midnight and Indigo Speculative Fiction Anthology, and other publications. Her blues history work features prominently in Mississippi folklife, and she has been heard on the Mississippi Arts Hour on Mississippi Public Broadcasting. She was the inaugural recipient of the FSG Writers Fellowship, and her short story, That Girl, won the O. Henry Prize. Dominion is her first novel. Addie, I am so excited to talk to you today. Dominion is by far one of my top novels this year. It has just every single thing that I love in a novel is in this one. So I am so excited for you to be joining me today and for us to talk about this.
Yay, I'm excited to be here and thank you so much. I'm glad to hear you enjoyed the novel. I enjoy it right now.
So this novel definitely has, I think, one of the best blurb lists that I've seen in promo this year. One of my favorite other authors is Casey Lehman, who, when I saw that blurb, I was like, oh, this is going to be so good. So going kind of off of that, what author's influence do you see kind of reflected in your own work, or what other authors' works have really inspired you in your writing journey?
I think for this novel, it's got old influencers. And so it may be blasphemous to say this, but I would say like Faulkner, Hurston, and Morrison. And I would say Faulkner and Hurston because of like the deceptive simplicity of the novel, and the humor that you don't know whether or not you should laugh at, whether or not it's appropriate, and its use of dialect and the really heaviness on location and where the characters are, because that take, that's a lot of the story. Also, I think Morrison, because of the story is brief, but it has that like steel booted oomph, I think, you know.
Oh, 100%. I can definitely see all of that reflected in the story. I think one of the things that you mentioned, the location for me was, I'm not from the South, but I was from the South when I was reading this book. Like I could just feel the space that the story was taking place in. But I did see that a lot of the issues that were kind of that the community was facing are issues that can be found kind of everywhere if you are looking and you're lifting the rocks up. Why was it important for you to set your story in a small town in Mississippi?
I think, small is basically simple because small Mississippi towns are the places I am most intimate. It's what I know. It's where I grew up. And I was asking another interview the other day. I was asked about what I wanted people to know about Mississippi, and I wanted them to know, like you said, it's just a microcosm of American society as a whole. But it's at
100%.
its most base, most hyperbolic, most hypocritical level because of just the adherence to strict biblical notions without knowing anything about the Bible or without being the person that they're supposed to be themselves. So I think it's just, just because it's a microcosm of society as a whole, plus it's what I know. And, every time you see the South fictionalized, it's always something that's ugly and less intelligent. I wanted this to be something that, would make you think,
100%. And I think your book definitely does that. like you said earlier, there were so many points where I was like, oh, I want to laugh, but this is so serious. And I'm like now reflecting on everything that's happening and everything that's going wrong in society right now. And has been. But I definitely think there was so much complexity with your characters and with the story itself. Like there were so many layers to it that I just, as you keep reading, you just keep discovering more and more. And you thought you knew the full story, but then it just keeps unfolding before you. Um, One of my favorite characters was Priscilla. Like I think at first I was a little frustrated with her because I'm like, you see all the red flags, Priscilla, please do something about this. But then you kind of get to know her a little bit more and you see why she's not making some calls that you would wish that she would
Mhm.
make. And I think that we see that reflected a lot in these in people who live in these kind of like situations. Why do you think it was so hard for her to kind of call out a lot of the toxic masculinity that she was seeing right in front of her?
Well, for one, toxic masculinity is all we know. Toxic
Mhm.
masculinity is masculinity for the most part.
Yeah.
Brashness is taught as a rule of masculinity. Violence is taught as a rule of masculinity. And I think it was hard for her to separate herself from it or call out those actions because we perceive our compliance in these systems as some sort of protection. And
Mhm.
so she had this idea that she was protecting her status in society. She had this idea she was protecting her husband's legacy, her son's legacy. And so she was operating without the knowledge um, that understanding that refining and rewriting and operating in reformed notions of masculinity, well, just throwing away these gender based systems is what it will take. But she's not necessarily there in her head yet. So she didn't understand that if masculinity, and a lot of us don't understand that if masculinity in itself wasn't dangerous, we wouldn't need protection from it. So I think we can all do better by calling it out and not entertaining it. Also, I think it was hard for Priscilla to call these actions out because admitting there was something wrong with her son, it's kind of like admitting there's something wrong with her. And that was not something that she wanted to sit with or she was ready to sit with or acknowledge yet in the story.
Yeah, and it also felt like in addition to just trying to save herself, like she was also protecting her son. Like, I think that's such a big point of the story where it's just like calling it out means that there's something wrong with the person that you're supposed to protect the most, right? So like how do you navigate that? Um, which this is not going to be a spoiler-free interview, which as people can maybe have guessed, because there's too much to talk about. And while I have you here, I'm going to take my opportunity to discuss it. Um, but yes, Priscilla loved her. The other, the story is told from two alternating perspectives. Priscilla, who is married to Saber, how you
Mhm.
pronounce it, who is, kind of runs the town, and Diamond, who is the girlfriend-esque of Wonder Boy, who is their golden son, who does not fall far from the apple tree, unfortunately. And Diamond is another, oh, I just want to hug her. I just want to hold her. I just want to tell her that everything's going to be okay. Um, why was it important for you to really center their voices um, in the story?
Because they're the ones that are unheard. And
Mhm.
so, actually, in the original draft that I wrote, there were parts that had Saber's point of view, and there were parts that had Wonder Boy's point of view, but they were scrapped in editing because I felt ultimately that it was unnecessary. It's because I believe cisgendered heterosexual males are the apex predators. And getting in their heads for me is just like asking a wolf to explain the hunt. All he's going to do is explain his justification for blood, for his misdeeds. So, also, it's the same way culture works. When you're in a minority in the system, you know all about the people who are the dominant culture. You're forced to interact with it on TV. you're forced to interact with notions of it in school. So, we already know their point of view. It's their right because of, like I said, this hyperbolic toxic masculinity thing that we have this love relationship with in this in the world, And so when you're a minority, you're so inundated with the hunter story that you believe they have a right to eat you. And I think both, Priscilla and Diamond had this idea, and so I didn't think it was necessary um to put the male point of view in it because you see the aftermath, and all they do is justify what they do.
Yes. And I think the only time where I was at my like, I want to know exactly what they're thinking was at the end, right as they're kind of, it's all coming full circle and everyone's kind of getting what's coming to them. Where I was just like, how you can explain this one away now, kind of a thing. But I do love that you chose to stay with Priscilla and Diamond because I think that kind of complexity of leaving that to the reader to just kind of don't consider that viewpoint is really important. So I love that.
And I think like the ending, I think I purposely left it kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
Just because it's kind of like, that Law and Order thing where they snatch stuff from the headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get all of this explanation about it, but sometimes you just don't know. And so it also fits into the community aspect of the novel. It's something for them to talk about for the next 10 years. It's the topic of conversation. So in the ways that, we had so many scandals, like for the small town I was in, we had so many scandals. I can name so many of them. And 15, 20 years down the line, people are still like, wondering about it. And so I think I kept it like that for that reason and said,
Yeah. And I loved it. The pacing of the book, I think, did so much for the story where you're layering and uncovering everything at the start. And then at the end, it's like the truth is catching up with everyone and it's just snowballing and snowballing until it just
that's how the truth is.
Yes, exactly. And it was so, so good. I can't wait for everyone to read it and to be able to talk to everyone about it.
I definitely want it to be something that like you could potentially read in one sitting.
You can.
Correct. And then you could come back and read again just because, you will have probably missed something, just because I planted those stuff in there. It was great working with FSG on it because, I was able to, at, every junction go plant something else. And so, I wanted to be that kind of novel that's paced so that, I don't like plodding through novels, I don't like, so I think I wrote the novel like I would want to read, but that I like, so yeah.
How long did it take you to write the novel?
I think I've been writing this since the beginning of the time, since I got here. Like,
yeah,
since I've been observing people, because I was a church kid, I've been watching, looking, and seeing, and I used to read books when I was at church. I used to read books while they were praying. So I was, I knew something wasn't quite right. So I knew it early. But, it was that kind of thing. So it's been kind of like ever since I was little and just taking notes and stuff because I'm a nosy writer,
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful way to classify a new like genre of books where like authors who are nosy, who are just like going to be looking into the human condition in like the exact way that like a small town fishbowl. I love that.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So talking a little bit more about Diamond and some of your characters, I think, was it hard to kind of write their stories? Because I think for a lot of parts of like Priscilla and Diamond's stories, I was just kind of like, oh, I just want to take you out of this situation, or I want this to be easy for you. Like, how hard was it to actually put pen to paper and kind of have your characters go through these situations?
Very, and there's some parts I noticed that I noted in the story because Diamond is an orphan, as far as she knows, and in the story, things happen to kids when they're in the system, and I purposely did not, put that on her, but to understand it still was heavy. And I think it was just so hard writing her just because was representative of the least protected class in this country, or maybe the world, a Black female child. Second class, we're objects. We're objects to do, to fetch, to use. And so I wanted her there, and I wanted her not to be used. Even though she's experiencing this, I didn't want her to be an object. And it was hard, it was hard because she's just like a tender spot, and like I just remember a girl just like her. And I remember her telling me her story when we were like kids. And I remember I was like, there's nothing, absolutely nothing I can do for her, absolutely nothing. And I think Diamond was my looking at girls like that and saying there are some things that you can do for yourself though. You don't have to be a part of this. You don't have to voluntarily do, that was that generation. We don't have to do it like that,
Yeah, for sure. And I think to an extent, like everyone knows someone like a Diamond in their life. And I think as much as tough as the read was at times, like you're just rooting for her the whole time and just wanting things to kind of turn around for her. So the care was definitely there. And it shows. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for readers to be introduced to Diamond and kind of get her side of things. What advice, if any, would you give, her and all the other Diamonds out there?
I would have given the advice that Miss Catherine tells her in the novel. But I would also tell her to center herself, love yourself, revel in yourself, because that's the most, important thing, be yourself, you don't have to hit yourself to someone to be someone. And so I think she kind of found an identity in him. And toward the end, she's understanding, because she was looking for identity. She was looking for her people. She was looking for, love. She was looking for all of that. But, in the end, I think she was just looking for herself. And that meant not having to go through what she was going through with,
100%. Oh, this is again not a spoiler-free interview at all. We're just making everyone very interested in wanting to fully understand what we're talking about. No, 100%. And I think her fascination and interest with Wonder Boy too, it was particularly hard because reading kind of like Priscilla's points of view, you see the concern that Priscilla has about her son, but then you see the Diamond like just avoiding those red flags, and you're just like, no, please, like just see it, girl. And it's like, I think especially as you're younger, it's really easy to avoid that because you just want the fairy tale ending, and the football star can definitely give that to you.
Right.
Yeah.
She's 17, of course, like I don't even want to think of my brain at 17, like
not at all. And that's the other thing though, is that she's 17 and she is so childlike in some ways, but she has been forced to grow up in other ways. So like I think the complexity again, like of all the characters, but of Diamond, of like knowing that she doesn't get it as much as she may like present that she does.
Right.
It is so hard. And it was beautiful characters.
Thank you
so much. How did you always know that, and I won't say what happens, but did you always know that Wonder Boy's ending was going to be what it was?
Absolutely not. Let me tell you, I wrote this novel. I started writing this novel a long, long time ago, and I actually had shopped it around before.
Mhm.
Um, with great success for the first half of it, you
Mhm.
know, but then I couldn't figure out, the ending. And I think I had to go through a process in life to be able to write the ending the way I did. So one of the things I had to do was understand, like, I was raised, my mom was married a lot of times.
Mhm.
And she was a person, my mom is like the first woman council person in city government at all in my hometown.
Mhm.
But she was very, at that time, very male centered, and I think that's a journey we went through together. Very male centered. She was going to get up in the morning. She was a principal. She was going to get up in the morning, cook breakfast before her husband went to work. She was going to cook, have him lunch. She was going to cook dinner. She was going to fold clothes. She was working, how many hours a teacher and a prince, because she was a
Mhm.
teacher, a counselor, principal. She worked 50, 60, 70 hours sometimes at work, but would come home and write on a man hand and foot. And so
Mhm.
those are things I'm like, this a raw deal. And so I had to basically work myself through those ways of thinking,
Yeah.
centering maleness, centering this idea that I need to be connected to a man, and that's
Mhm.
what validated me. So I think I had to go through that process of decentering maleness and masculinity before I could write the correct end. And
Yeah.
so that just took years of my life to do it. That took learning and experience, you know.
Oh, that's so, I love that you said that because I feel like while I was reading it, that's how I felt reading it, where I was just like, I shouldn't say that choice of word that I was going to say on the podcast, but just kind of like shifting of being like, yes, men are like this, and the observation of like, and you get to choose yourself throughout all of it, which is
Right.
ultimately, what Priscilla does. Even when it's hard, even when you're the talk of the town, it has to be about you and your survival and your success
Hmm.
outside of just
It's
survival.
the original ending was Diamond in some way got her happily ever after with him.
Hmm.
But I left it kind of like intentionally dubious.
Hmm.
Just because she's not really getting it, because what a leopard doesn't change its spots, you know.
Hmm.
So, but I knew that wasn't kind of powerful enough.
Hmm.
And so because I don't know, I
I
don't
think
know.
that would have broken my heart at the end because I like as a reader, that he's not what he appears to be,
Right.
and it will have eventually like showed up in front of her in a way that she could no longer like ignore the signs.
That, and I
Hmm.
didn't want her to remain naive. I wanted her to have the same process that I guess I had,
Yeah.
learn,
Hmm.
So, and I think maybe because, like I said, like the earliest drafts of this in some way was finished like maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, probably like in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
So the earliest drafts were finished then, but I would put it away, look at it again, put it away, look at it again. And times are very different then.
Hmm.
So there's this process of where everybody, there was a time where people got to be seen. Everybody of any kind of gender expression could be who
Hmm.
they were. There was a while we were all visible in this short
Hmm.
amount of time. And I think that amount of time, and you know how what's going on now. But
Hmm.
now I think that short amount of time gave me the freedom to free her too.
Yeah. Well, it definitely shows, and it's just such a powerful read. And I think this is one where it's like I want mothers and daughters to read it
Mm,
too, because
me too.
I want them to talk about it. I think for a lot of us, we grew up in a generation where, yeah, the patriarchy was the center of the family, and like that's where the focus was, and that's where the care went. And it's definitely, it's shifting now. But I think kind of opening up those healing conversations for daughters to say how they felt growing up in that, and for mothers to say that's maybe not what I wanted either. So I think this is like such a
Mhm.
great book to kind of open up those conversations, and for everyone to kind of see that even though we are making strides towards a less male-centered, society, there's still work to do, and it's not over.
Right.
Well, Addie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and congratulations on this absolutely stellar debut novel. I cannot wait to see what's next, and we're so looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!